Welcome back to the High Vibe Life podcast with me, Moira Casaba. I am revisiting a topic that I have talked about over the last, 10 to 15 years many times. And it is worth repeating because it has completely changed my life. It is one of those things that I heard many, many years ago, and I will never forget because it changed how I see my life. It changed how I see the world. And really, I often talk about how I kind of feel like I am an expert at getting people unstuck only because I've been stuck so many times in my own life. And this is one of those things that instantly gets me unstuck, right? I always think about all the tools that I've kind of gathered over the years as like a tool belt. And you want to make sure you have this tool belt to where when you get stuck in whatever area it is, you can just kind of whip out a tool real quick, change it, and keep on going with your life, right? We don't want to end up in these places where we get stuck for long. We want to have that tool belt of solutions. And so many of these things are what I often refer to, like Robin Sharma does, as brain tattoos, right? These little quotes or these little sayings that just flip the switch in your brain from stuck to unstuck. And so this is it, okay? The only two things, this is profound. The only two things that will make us happy in life are growth and contribution. Thank you, Tony Robbins, for teaching me that many, many, many years ago. And so I remember hearing that. And of course, he explained it so well. And I was thinking, at first I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But no, listen, if you think about this and examine your own life, it makes so much sense. And any time that you come up against that stuckness, that unhappiness, that ill at ease, you can really examine your life very quickly and go, am I growing? Am I contributing? Right? And so if you think about this, let's think about, and I feel like this is the one that like really made me understand this years and years and years ago, because I used to really struggle in my body with my health journey. And, I realized that it doesn't matter if I was 5 pounds overweight, 20 pounds overweight, at the perfect weight, in whatever it was the progress of starting the journey that brought me joy, right? It was training for a 5K and that first mile that you ran, and then you got to 2 miles. Like I can remember this. I can remember being like, you can make it to the stop sign. You can do it. And the amount of joy that I felt because I was progressing, right? So whether that's a weight loss journey and you're making progress, and so progress and growth are used here interchangeably, right? You're making progress towards a goal. Think about it when you're building a business. The most joy I have ever had building businesses is when I start from zero and I start to grow, right? I start to impact more lives and more lives and more lives. And I start to be able to feel that change rippling out, right? I'm growing in my influence. I'm growing in my impact. I'm growing in my income. Guys, success does not bring us joy. I want you to know that. I have been at the tippy top of the mountain where everybody dreams of, where I dreamed of, right? That my whole goal for years and years and years and years and years was to make it to that spot, earning this income at the tippy top, number one spot in the company. Guess what happened when I got there? I don't know if I'd call it depression, but it was definitely a really hard place in my life, a really hard season for a long period of time because I stopped growing, right? There wasn't another step on the ladder for me to go to. So all of a sudden, what brought me so much joy for years, climbing that ladder, getting up one more step, changing one more life, all of a sudden really came to a screeching halt. The business also started to experience a lot of difficulty, so it was harder to impact more lives. But all of a sudden, when things start to tip in the down direction, we get really unhappy and really uncomfortable and really dissatisfied with our life. And so often you can sit there and think like, everything's great. What is wrong with me, right? What is wrong with me? Why am I not happy? And here's the cool thing about growth and contribution. You might not be growing in your business. It might be a recession, right? It might be a tough season and we're not seeing that growth or that progress in our business. Well, we can go sign up for a 10K and start to experience growth and progress in our training program. You start to pull these levers where you realize, gosh, I'm not growing over here. I'm going to continue to try to grow. I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing over here, but I need to really find growth and progress in an easier realm so that I'm satisfied, so that I'm excited, so that I keep that energy high, so I keep that level of happiness, right? And here's the other piece, contribution, understanding that it's not just the climb. It's not just the progress. It's not just the growth. If we are not contributing to the world, there will be no level of happiness, right? And so this was the most shocking to me when I had a favorite uncle. He's one of the most important people in my lives. No one in my life probably ever has loved me more unconditionally. He was one of the most special people that will ever come into my entire life. And he's passed away about, 5, maybe even 8 years ago. And he was the happiest guy, like so much joy, even when he experienced illness or whatever it was. That just nothing seemed to affect him, right? Nothing seemed to affect him. He was so joyous and so happy, always contributing, always having these little hobbies that brought him so much joy. And I'll never forget going to his house, which I'd gone to many times, and nothing had really changed. He was sick, right? It was the end of his life, but he had been sick on and off throughout his life. But this was a point in his life where he really couldn't physically participate in any hobbies anymore. And he really wasn't impacting all the lives everywhere this man went, he brought joy into people's lives, even if it was at the gas station or the bowling alley or the grocery store, right? But his life all of a sudden became limited and very small. And I walked into his house and I saw a version of him that I never had known my whole life. He was there was no joy. There was no spark. And a lot of people would say, well, that's because he's sick and it's at the end of his life. But that's not how I saw it at all. I understood at that point that if he could write letters to somebody to change their life, if he could have flipped that switch to understand, gosh, even if and I saw this in my mom's life at the end of her life too, no matter how sick and limited my mom was, if she was making progress, right? If she was lifting a 1-pound weight and then the next day she was like, oh my gosh, I got to 2 pounds. If there was progress or growth, there was joy. If she was able to impact and contribute to the world, there was joy, no matter what life looked like from the outside looking in, right? And so I want you to think about that in your own life. We spend so many hours doing things that don't contribute to the world. We spend so many hours doing things that don't create progress or growth in our own lives. And gosh, if we spent more hours doing things that either contributed to the world or created progress in our life, we would have so much more joy. We think that joy is found in the paycheck or the car or this goal or that goal. Yes, in the goal, if it means you making progress and growing, right? And I mean, the first thing I think about when I think about like wasting time on things that don't create any level of contribution in the world or growth, like myself included, how many hours do we spend watching mindless TV when we could invest that time? And a lot of people would say like, well, I want to chill out. I want to unplug. Yeah, we can totally do that, but we can do it in a capacity that allows us to grow, that allows us to progress, even if it's in our own mindset, right? Think about the books we could be reading, the things that we could be doing. So often we know more about pop culture than we know about our own body or our own mind, right? Think about becoming a master, if you are a master, gosh, you guys, the amount of time that we spend on mindless stuff that creates zero impact in our lives or other people's lives. If we took that time, I remember hearing this one time that it was like, there was some correlation between the amount of hours and you're like, yep, everybody does that, myself included. And it was like, yeah, in 2 years, you could become a concert pianist. Some speaker said that. And I was like, oh, I was blown away, right? The amount of time we waste could be replaced with mastery over something, right? Mastery in our bodies, in our health, mastery in our mindset, mastery in our job, right? Again, think about so often when you're learning a new skill or you're learning a new job, yes, there can be overwhelm and stress, but there's also this curiosity, there's this excitement, you're learning, you're growing, you're teaching, you're coaching, whatever it is, you're leading people. And then that dream that you once dreamed that you finally get to live over time becomes monotonous, right? It becomes ho-hum. Because even though you might be doing the work that you once dreamed about, you stop growing in it. You stop getting better at it, right? Commit to a level of mastery, commit to a level of getting better in any capacity that you want to, personal, impersonal, whatever it is, professionally, recreationally. When we start to see that growth, that progress, life changes, joy changes, energy changes. So I just want to leave you today with that little nugget and that little kind of encouragement to do that little bit of a self-examination in your own life. Think about, gosh, where in my life am I experiencing progress or growth? And if I'm not experiencing it, what could I add into my life where I can really see that forward momentum towards something, right? And then where and how could I contribute? So another example of this was yesterday. I think it was yesterday. I had a really busy day, right? A packed day of work, do, action, which is all great. And I love it. And it's, contributing to the world. There's growth, there's progress there. But I had spent Monday and Tuesday really doing a lot of that same stuff. And it was the third day of the week and it was just more of the same, right? I mean, it's my job. I love it. 2 people called me. One person was a type 1 diabetic mom, newly diagnosed child, wanted me to meet her for coffee. Another one was somebody that wanted me to help with one of their children that has an eating disorder. And I could have so easily said, I can't do tomorrow, but maybe next week or maybe this weekend because my schedule's booked. But I immediately paused because I remember contribution. I remember that literally the nectar of life, the joy of life, the fulfillment that we're so desperately looking for in a job or a paycheck most often comes from how we contribute. And good gosh, I can contribute in those capacities. I've lived it, right? And so I didn't even, hesitate. And I said, I'll be there for the coffee date and I'll be there at 8 a.m. I'll be there at 10 a.m. I'll move my meetings. Because this is a priority. This is what life is about, contributing, giving back to the world. So again, just do a little examination and also ask yourself, thirdly, where are you just kind of wasting time that could be filled with immense contribution or growth or a hobby that you could get really good at that could become part of you, right? And not just filled with mindless TV or the like. All right, you guys, I will see you next week. Share this episode with a friend. Tag me if you share it on your social media, and we will see you on next week's episode. Thanks for tuning in.